Okay, ready?
Ready to go.
Okay. So I'm new to this and I'm really happy to have been invited. Thank you so much for making me a part of this incredible group. I look forward to being Minatzchim the Gaulis together with all of us. I want to begin, as I was asked to say, in Inyan of Geula. We talk a lot about bringing the Mashiach to our communities. The Rebbe also had a very important dagush on davening for Mashiach and demanding that Mashiach should come now. That was one of the very, very important themes that the Rebbe always emphasized when talking about Mashiach. So I want to devote a few moments to this subject. So we may or may not be aware that in Medrash Tehillim, there is a very interesting teaching that all of the warriors, all of the soldiers that fell, B'yimei David, they fell only because they didn't demand from the Eibishter the Binyan Beis Hamikdash. And think about it. In their days, there was no Beis Hamikdash. It would have been a demand for something that Pashat had never existed before. And yet, if they would have demanded the Beis Hamikdash, none of David's warriors would have fallen. We know from Basi Legani this year, the Taich of the Rebbe Rashab and the Rebbe's explanation of Kol HaYetzel Melchemes Beis David Get Krishas Kesef Le'ishtei. That's how they fought. And nevertheless, because they didn't daven, they didn't demand that Mashiach should come now, some of them weren't successful and some of them fell in battle. So the Rebbe very often talked about the tefillah that we say 3 times a day as Tzemach David Avducha Meheres Atzmiach Bekarne Torah B'Shuasecha Ki D'Shuasecha Kibina Kol HaYom. So very powerful sikha where the Rebbe says that this is not a tefillah we say 3 times a day, that this is a tefillah that we say all day long. The Rebbe says when you stand there, you would hope that if there's one moment of emes in the day, that's the emes. So if we're asking for Mashiach, what's saying is Tzemach David Avducha, and we're saying Lishuascha Kibinu Kol Hayom, the ganze Tag Hofter Better as a soll sein Yeshuascha, then that means that it's not just in a moment, it's an entire day. And when you finish Shachris and you lived with it a whole day, and Mincha arrived, and Mashiach is noch nicht gekommen, so you stand up and you ask again, and then a third time. And the Rebbe also quoted on several occasions the Chidah. The Chidah taich ki lishuascha kivinu kol hayom, and he asked, what does it mean that bring Mashiach because we are hoping for him? L'cheda, bring Mashiach because we need him, because we're suffering. Bring Mashiach because we want these galus of atzmos mahus. Bring Mashiach because we want to have the days that the Rambam describes that we'll be sitting all day just to understand, just to learn about Alakus. That's a reason to have Mashiach. What does it mean? Ki lishuascha kivinu kol hayom. So the Rebbe would often quote the Chidah that says that the very fact that we're asking for Mashiach and we're hoping for Mashiach, that itself is a reason for us to be zeichet to Mashiach. So as Tzemach David Avducha Meheres Atzmiach Lama Ki Lishuascha Kivinu Kol Hayom. By what schus can we demand the fact that we're asking for it? So we need to bring it to our communities. We also need to ask. I want to conclude these remarks with quoting for you a Sfas Emes on Shmos from Tov Reish Samach Vav. We all know Samach Vav is a very pivotal year in Chassidus Chabad. That year, the Sfas Emes said the following. He says, "Vayomos Melech Mitzrayim, Vayayonchu Bnei Yisrael." So the Sfas Emes says like this: His Zayda said that the moment that Meis Melech Mitzrayim, the Yidden were in such a terrible galus up until that point, that they didn't even feel that they were in galus. Like the Baal Shem Tov says about Haster Aster, that the main Hester is that you don't even realize that you're in a state of concealment. What happened when Parei Melech Mitzrayim died? Says the Sfas Emes, the Ata Hischil Ktsas Geula, Shehevinu HaGalus, they started understanding that they're in galus, the Hisanchu, and they began to moan and to groan. And then this Sfas Emes concludes, Ume'ein Ze Nimtze B'chol Galus. Something like this happens every single galus, that at some point we come to realize that we're in galus and we stop being okay with it. We don't accept it anymore. And we demand from the Eibishter that he should bring us Mashiach. And the Rebbe would often talk about this important point. So as we talk about bringing Mashiach to our communities, we also need to talk about bringing Mashiach to our own hearts, that we shouldn't be satisfied. And if Shachris passed and Mashiach didn't come, we don't wait for Mincha to ask again. But as the Rebbe says, Kol Hayoim, which, by the way, is not just a Lubavitch. Today we see that Mashiach is infiltrated throughout all of the Kreisen. So, by the way, the Griz, the Brisker, he is the one who said, Kol Hayoim means all day long. All day long, not just once a day, every day, or 3 times a day, every day. So even if you're talking to a misnagid, you can point to him, point out this Griz, and you can say that by them also, they teach that all day long you have to be asking for Mashiach. With no further ado, I want to introduce the first of our 2 presenters today, Rabbi Ari Shishler, who needs no introduction. He's the Rebbe Shliach in Chabad of, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly. Rabbi Shishler, you will correct me if I'm wrong. Chabad of Strathavon in South Africa.
Shkoyach, thank you, Rabbi Gurkow, Strathavon. Thank you, and Yashikoyach to all the organizers putting this together, Rabbi Rubenfeld, etc. So we had a very interesting conversation the other day, and it feels that Rabbi Rubenfeld and myself were very much on the same page, and that's what he asked me to speak about. And by way of introduction, I came across something interesting, which maybe isn't such a chiddush, but when you think about it, it's very clear as a direction. And that is often when we speak to people and we tell them that the Rebbe said we're living in the time of Yemei Mashiach, and that we have to open our eyes, and that Mashiach Geula is unfolding around us, and we're sitting already at the table, etc. So we do know that we have certain key examples that the Rebbe gave us of how we know we're living in Yemei Mashiach. So one of those examples is 30 years old. In fact, most of them are 30 years old, but this one in particular, this month, is the 30th anniversary of the victory in the Gulf War. I'll tell you an interesting story. At the time, we were bochrim and very excited about what was going on. And unfortunately for me, I was still here in South Africa, but I had chaverim and we were in Kfar Chabad, and I felt like we were missing all the good stuff. They were in Kfar Chabad, and the missiles were flying, and everybody had gas masks, and they used to go onto the roof of the yeshiva to watch the fireworks. Every time that there was missiles, because the Rebbe said everything's going to be fine, and it's the safest place, and so on and so forth. So they really lived that. And unfortunately for us, left behind over here, we just had to read about it in the newspaper and whatever. So there was a particular fellow who was on my Mifsoim route. And I told him, because there was a story going around at the time, if you remember, from Colonel Goldstein, that he asked the Rebbe if he should take a Megillah, who was being deployed at that point, I think, to Saudi Arabia, if I'm not mistaken. And he wanted to know if he should take a Megillah, and the Rebbe said no. So from that, people said the war is going to end by Purim. But if I understand correctly, the Rebbe never said the war is going to end on Purim. He said you're not going to need a Megillah. And in fact, he was then redeployed to a Patriot unit that was in Eretz Yisrael already quite a while before Purim. In any event, so we all went, and on Miftzoi, we told everybody, watch, you're going to see, the Rebbe said Eretz Yisrael is the safest place. Can you see the missiles are flying and nothing's happening? And the Rebbe said that it's going to end on Purim. That's what we told people. And I had a Megillah reading planned at this guy's store early in the morning. It was like 6:30 in the morning or something like that, because he had all the people from this was my Miftzoi was in a mall. So all the people from the stores around, they were all going to come before they opened their stores, and they were going to hear Megillah, and we'd have a little Purim party with them. So I walk in, 6:30 in the morning, Purim morning, and as I walk through the door, the guy says to me, "Your Rebbe was right. Your Rebbe was right," because they had just announced the official ceasefire. So it was easy at that point to say, you see, the Rebbe's right, and nothing happened in Eretz Yisrael, and the war ended by Purim, and that's it. It's happening. It's imminent. If you tell somebody today, many people of whom were not even alive at that time, it's interesting because I have a class that via Zoom. Before Zoom became popular, we had a class already in Beis Rivka in New York. So I give the class from here via Zoom, and I was talking to them about the Gulf War, and they had no idea, like. If you try and tell people of that generation that Mashiach's coming because there was a Gulf War, it's so out of their reality. So we dare not fall into that trap of saying that those were the only Simonim. Those were certainly Simonim. The Rebbe said those are Simone Geula. But the Rebbe also said, and this is the part that I noticed recently in many of those sikhs, with regards to the Gulf War, with regards to what was happening at the time of the fall of communism, with regards to the idea of the United Nations getting together to condemn Israel. In a whole lot of those sikhs, the Rebbe uses an expression again and again that these things are me'ein dugma v'hachana to Yemos HaMashiach. It's fascinating lashon. Me'ein dugma v'hachana, which means it's like 3 different kinds of simonim almost. And you look, and the Rebbe is specific in how they're a me'ein and how it's a dugma. But basically what that means is, number one, it's a me'ein, that's for sure. So the idea of Yidden getting out of the communist regime and being able to come to Eretz Yisrael and practice freely is a me'ein of kibbutz galuyos. That's clear, that you can see the correlation. But the fact that Rebbe says dugma in each of these cases, it's a dugma. That means to say that that's an illustration to us how we're supposed to read world events. For us as Lubavitchers, we have to read every single thing that's happening in the world, that those were the dugmaos that the Rebbe gave us of things that are hachana or me'ein. It's almost like there's 2 options. Some things are hachana for Mashiach, some things are already a me'ein of the Geula, and that's how we have to look at the world. That's how we have to read the world. And see, what do you say? Simon Boras Cholas Kiyuma Yud Ze Mishpatim Nun Beis. Okay, there you go. Mishpatim Nun Beis, exactly. Fascinating sikha, by the way. And a lot of things to think about also when you look at the state of the United Nations today, and when you look at the fact that they're now reneging on the Iranian deal. Fascinating. Okay, so things we have to try and work out over here. But I'm not going to go there right now. So the point is, when we open our eyes and when we have a look around, it's not like the Mashiach thing started and it was very exciting. And then, it kind of lost steam, as some people may use that expression. It's kind of ran out of steam and it's no longer happening because there's none of these mega things happening in the world. It's not true, first of all. There are mega things happening in the world, and maybe we've just become so used to them that the idea of reading about Mashiach in the newspapers has become so obvious to us that we don't even pay attention to it. But the point is that if you go back and you look at the Simonim and the Yehudim of Geula, and you have a look in the Nevuos, and you have a look in the Gemaras and so forth, and then you look at what's happening in our world, you come to the conclusion that one of 2 things is true. Either we don't know enough about what's happening in the world, which is probably a good thing, or we don't know enough about what's supposed to happen when you're in your Yemos HaMashiach. But when you start looking at both of them, the correlation is mind-blowing to the extent that there hasn't been, the big word of last year was unprecedented, right? Eventually it reached a point you're not allowed to say it anymore because it was so overused. But it is unprecedented that there should be so many Simone Geula happening literally in our lives. And so the point is, how do we illustrate this? How do we tell it to people? Sometimes you think that people are going to look at you as if you're a Meshugana. Had an interesting conversation. So there's a talk that I did a while ago in Geula, and it was exactly this topic, and it's now completely outdated because it's 8 years ago, something like that. And so many new things have happened in the world that are really, speaking the Inyonei Geula. But what's interesting, a few weeks ago, one of the Rebbe from Geula told me that it's one of the most viewed videos that they have. And he said every time they have something with Mashiach as a keyword, those are the most viewed videos. And we don't know who's watching. It's not just from people, the Lubavitchers are watching. That's how it is. You look around and you speak about, what do you think? People are going to think you're a Meshugana. When we speak about Inyonei Geula, when we illustrate to people, people are lost right now. They see no direction. The vaccine thing isn't necessarily working out as well as they anticipated. And all the promises of science are not necessarily delivering. And we're the ones with clarity. We say to them, this is the unfolding of Geula. Do I have all the answers? I don't have all the answers. But I did a little exercise the other day just to see what information happened in the course of the month of January that could in any way, news items that came in the month of January that could in any way relate to Inyonei Geula. Because that's, I think, what we're supposed. I'm not suggesting we should go now reading newspapers and the media and this and that. I had an interesting debate once with a guy in our Chabad house He said, it's very important to read the news. I said, why is it important to read the news? You guys tell me everything anyway. What do I have to read the news for? So people will tell us things. We have to know how to see what they're telling us. So I just want to give you one little example, because to me, it was an absolutely mind-blowing example. Absolutely mind-blowing. Besides the fact that in January, there was a guy who said, that he believes his grandchild, he's a doctor, he's a medical person, a science person, said he believes that his grandchild could live to 1,000 years old. Now, this is not the first scientific person to speak this way, but this is now considered a mainstream voice as opposed to some of the other guys who are a little bit on the fringes. So that's fascinating. You know, you often hear these things, but what I came across this month, and apparently it's not news, it was news to me, absolutely amazing. There are a group of scientists in various places around the world who believe that, of course, one of the greatest challenges we have in the world today is the production of energy. And we know the Rebbe spoke so much about solar energy, but the idea of the production of energy and the energy crisis and so on and so forth. So there are a group of scientists, apparently they've been working on this for quite a long time, in various places around the world, who believe that it is possible, and don't ask me how this works, I'm not an astrophysicist, I don't know how it works, but they believe that it is possible to launch some kind of a machine or whatever it is to the edge of a black hole, where one part of the technology crosses what they call the event horizon into the black hole, and the other part of the technology remains outside of the black hole and is then able to get this incredible energy from a black hole that they say could power more than all the energy needs of the entire Earth from one burst, so to speak, which is mamash yisran ha'or mina choshech, or laila kayoim yo'ir, the idea of darkness itself becoming a source of light and power and so forth. Anyhow, it's just an example. It's a short piece of time that I have to talk about this now. I was going to show a little bit of a PowerPoint. We don't have time, just to whet everybody's appetites. But the point is, me'ein dugma v'hachana, that the Rebbe wants us to see things in the world. This is a taste of Mashiach. It's a preparation for Mashiach, and it's an example of how life will be in the time of Geula.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Shishler. Yesterday, Rabbi Rubinfeld told me that between speakers, I should say Misha Beirach and Ya'amoid. So Misha Beirach, Rabbi Shishler, the Eibishter soll der benchen. You should continue all of your work with Hatzlacha Rabbah, not just in your Chabad house at Strathavon, but also around the world, because Shmoi Hoylech Lefanav. And now I would like to say Ya'amoid. Let's hear from Rabbi Tanhoum Matusof of Chabad of Monte Carlo in Monaco. Is he on the call?
Yes, I think that we can hear.
Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead.
So,
You're still sitting. Ich habe gesagt, Ya'amoid.
to win a war, we need two things. One, to have the correct weapons, the kelim, but more important than that is the motivation of the soldiers. And בנגיע לענייננו, the Bizbuz ha'etzres, the king is giving all the kelim, all the keiches, all the tools to win this war. But more important than that is that the soldiers, the Shluchim being at the first line, we should be full of motivation for this purpose. And I want very short to speak about these 2 points, the motivation and the tools. And when we speak about was zu tun, wie zu tun, most of the time we think about what we should do, how we should do, with tools we should use. The Rebbe says that if there is the will, there is the way. That means, ein davar ein b'fnei harotzin. If we really want, keiches there is, tool there is, way to give. People are ready to hear. Rabbi Shishler just said, what people want to hear more, it's about Mashiach. This is something that's evident. Everyone knows that. So, the keiches are here. People are ready to hear. The only one who are missing in the picture or need to be more in the picture is myself, the motivation of the soldiers. And when it comes to the subject of Moshiach, that this is the main shluchas and the sha'af for all the shluchas, se kommt on schwer. And because it's so important, so the Yetzer Hara is on top of this subject. And because the Yetzer Hara is on top of this subject, that's sure itself that it's so important. So the main and the first and the most important is by ourselves, each shliach for itself and into his family, the koch and the living with Moshiach. And the moment we have this for ourselves, then all the rest, it's already the easy part. And probably most of you saw it, it came out the Likutei Sichos Chelek Mem. So in the second one, there is a Sikha of Kitiso Mem Aleph about women and children Benegia Lebias HaMoshiach. It's a Mugedike Sikha. It was printed in Sichas Kiddush Mem Aleph, but now it came out. And there is a line. The Inyan of the woman in Bias Moshiach, everyone knows that the Arizal said it's the same Neshames from that came out of Mitzrayim. But the Rebbe there, in the Mugedike Sikha, it goes like this. I have it in front of me. Ukmer Anoshim de'az shelinosnu la'egel, that the women didn't participate in the egel. Velochein hanoshim de'ikveso de'meshicho sheltes al ba'alein v'chulu. And therefore, be'ikveso de'meshicho, the women rule over their husband, coming from the Kinus HaShluchas. So it's Inyonei the Yema. But Al Kalpanim, to live about Moshiach, it begins issue base, the house, the kids, that every day, every week, in the house by ourselves, it shall be daily and daily and daily, the koch about Moshiach. And when the Rebbe spoke about it, that kommt on schwer, the Eitze is to learn about it. So it all begins with learning about it. For example, we mentioned about Mishpatim Nun Beis. How can it be that it comes Mishpatim Nun Beis and maybe in my house, some people don't know about that Sikha. So this is where it begins with. It begins with me and with my house. The mandate of Shlichus today is the Sikha of Knus HaShluchim Nun Beis. And I asked myself, when is the last time I learned, together with my wife, together with my kids, that Sikha? That's something that constantly needs to be B'chol Yom Chodoshim, Chodoshim Mamesh, in order to make it happen. So, to win a war, the Iker is the motivation. If there is a motivation, Memele, all the rest is the easy part. And many times when we come together, we speak about great tools, how to say, what to say. But this is very, if we need to want, we need to be convinced ourselves totally more and more. And this is a daily arbet, because the Yetzer Hara is working on it very strong. Now about the tools, when it comes to how to give over, I want to show you something personally. I had the optionesh of my son. I wanted to give to 100 people that came to the Beis Chabad a booklet that explained in English to general people that they don't necessarily have a lot of background in knowledge of Yiddishkeit, to explain about Moshiach. So I called Kehos, I called the stores. I looked for a booklet that explained the subject of Moshiach. The answer was out of salt, came out in an Aleph, on Beis, on Gimel, or there is not such a thing. Now, how is it possible? This is the main shlichus, and the material exists. There is millions of things that exist on the net, very good things. There is a Chabad or Moshiach campaign, Moshiach 101. There is millions of articles and how to give over. And to find a booklet, it was difficult. What came out of giving with this very nice small pamphlet about the time of science, there was one about Moshiach. So I proposed it nicely right, and I give it. It's a few words, it's a little glimpse, but it's something. But for example, something like this is very simple. To take everything that I explained for someone that we want to give to someone in the hand, a little booklet, we put it together, we printed a million pieces of it. If there is the motivation, what's difficult to do it? Money, it's not at all an issue. The material exists, and it's a very simple thing. Now, there is a lot of tools that exist, and not necessarily that I know about it, and many shluchim know about it because there are things that came out in the past and that are spread in so many different platforms. So maybe it's outside. It will be something good that there is here the Shliach on charge of Moshe campaign or in any other form to gather all the existing material that there is about Moshiach. So many articles, videos, and this. One is in this place, was in that place. There is so many in 302. There is so many offices, Geula and Sikis and my Shliach. Moshiach campaign is a shah. Moshiach campaign is to connect it with Geula and with Sikis and with each one. The Moshiach campaign works together with them as material, gather all this material on this platform, and makes it accessible in a very easy way for any Shliach that wants to reach any type of crowd, beginners, or learn people, to have the material gathered. So the tools is the easy part. But what we really need, and it begins from the house, it begins from ourselves, it begins from our kids, from ourselves, us, our wife, and our kids, the koch, the lemon with Moshiach. And to conclude, when it came Yuchah this year, 70 years from the first minor, so I begin something new. In my case, it's something very simple. Probably many of you, most of you are already doing it. To come out with a weekly video, and it's based on the Sikha of the Aleph base of this week, of the week, but make it accessible to someone that not necessarily have a background of knowledge, of learning of Yiddishkeit, and in a few minutes to bring him a kude, and I called it Torah in Monte Carlo. You can Google it if you want. You have it on YouTube. And I found out that there is a lot of easy tools that exist. For example, from an iPhone, I can film myself, and in order to speak properly, you can even type the text. There is an application called Teleprompter, and you read it. The one that see the video think that you look at it because it's next to it's on the screen. So you look full time at the screen, and you have the text. I'm writing myself, so it's my own text, so it's the way I talk, and I have the possibility, it's in English, to prepare, it's not my first language, so to prepare it before in a proper way, and to read it, and I have like this, it's a little tools. But if all this material will be gathered and accessible, that would make for all the Shluchim easier to come out to their Kehilis, and even part of it can be material for Shluchim and their families. That also a weekly material to give a daily material for Shliach and his wife, for Shliach and his kids. When we sit at the table, now we in many places, more time at home. So to use it, that the koch of Mashiach should be ourselves, and the victory of any war, and this is proved in the wars of the world, that it depends mainly on the head of the soldiers. If they are decided to win the war, they win the war. Nothing can stop them. So there is bizbuz ha'etzes, the Rebbe is giving the keches, and it's sure that the shluchim are motivated. And this is how Mashiach will come right now. Mashiach now.
Eshikoyach, Rabbi Pinson. I was just.
By the way, my name is Rabbi Matusof. My mother is a Pinson, so it's both right.
Eshikoyach, Rabbi Matusof. And Eshikoyach to your mother, Rabbi Pinson, for raising such a Chassidish younger man and a Shliach of the Rebbe. I was just reading over Shabbos the newly released, translated into English, Zechrenis of my Zaydim, Reb Meir Gurkow. And in it, he describes the beginnings of the communist era. And he said that the communists nearly lost the war. The Cossacks were making great advances, and they came to Moscow, and the communists were losing in every battle. But in the end, it was Me'ashem Yotza Davar that they won. And he gave a rational explanation. The rational explanation was that the Cossacks were fighting because they were getting paid. And the communists were fighting because they were motivated by their ideology. So this goes to what both of our presenters spoke today, that we have to be motivated by our own ideology. We have to maintain clarity, as Rabbi Shishler said. even in a time where our communities feel that this is an era of darkness because of what's going on with COVID and with the messy distribution system of the vaccine and the managed expectations of its efficacy. Nevertheless, we have to be not only a voice of light and of clarity that Mashiach is coming, but we actually have to believe it ourselves. And as Rabbi Matusof was saying, we need the tools so that we can learn ourselves in what way the world is heading towards Mashiach. So we have on the call today, Rabbi Wolf, who is renowned for his insights into how this world is leading toward Mashiach. I didn't ask him about this in advance, but I thought to myself that since after this call wraps up at 1:30, there's going to be an opportunity for Shluchim to stay on the call and to share suggestions and advice. Perhaps, Rabbi Wolf, if you could just type the invitation link to your daily WhatsApps, or I don't know how often they come out, and you can share that with the wider Kahal HaShluchim so that people can see some of your ideas and how you find positive messages in things that are going on in today's day and age. It'll motivate us, as Rabbi Matusof was saying, and it will enable us to bring clarity to the world, as Rabbi Shishler was saying. I want to conclude with just a quick thought. We can learn from the Le'umazeh. So last night, there was one of the biggest media events in the year in the United States. It was the football game, the Super Bowl. The Super Bowl is a big event because they hype it in advance. For weeks in advance, you're seeing advertisements, if you're looking, that are telling you that this is absolutely an event that you have to make sure that you're there. It's going to be amazing. It's going to be absolutely the best. Nothing like anything in the past. Just wait, you'll see. The more it's hyped, the bigger an event it is. We have to be the ones that are hyping Mashiach's coming. And ultimately, that's the reason that we're together here today. So this wraps up today's event. Rabbi Rubenfeld, thank you so much for inviting me to the group and for inviting me to be the MC today. For those who would like to stay on to continue with Ishas or to give suggestions of what's working in your Kehillah or various tools that you've been able to find that Rabbi Matusof is searching for, please stay on and enjoy. A good tavach and atzlacha rabba, everybody, with all of our Avodas HaShlichus, and mainly the Aveda of the Achana L'Bias HaMashiach.